Hey everybody, it's Poohead189 here, and today I'm going to give you a special little lore video on the magic in the world of Warhammer Fantasy. Next video will likely be on the magic itself and how it works, and that'll also pertain to 40k, but today we're going to talk about the magic origins and classification. And I want everyone to thank my bro Omega056 for asking for this vid. He's a great pal of mine and he deserves some lovin'. So let's get started. You can't really talk about magic in the Warhammer world without talking about the beginning of the Warhammer world. You see, 12,000 years before the current timeline, the Warhammer world was a vast frozen wasteland, with its only inhabitants being small animals and great beasts that fought for dominance at the equator for habitable land to live on. That is, until a race of beings called the Old Ones arrived. The Old Ones are a highly advanced race of reptilian beings, so advanced that they were pretty much gods in what they were capable of. The Old Ones have a great plan, fulfilling prophecies and shaping the universe the way they see fit. They did the same to the Warhammer world, first moving the world so it orbited closer to the sun, melting the ice in most areas of the planet. They began to reshape the continents of the world, making mountains into canyons, flooding valleys to make oceans, and drying seas to expand land masses. They not only engineered the world, but the animal life on it. The first race they created were the Slann, or the Slann, who were their greatest servants, and the lizardmen who in turn followed the Slann. Slann are frog-like beings, much akin to the Old Ones, and they were second only in power to their masters. And to this day, the Slann that live are the greatest magic users in the Warhammer world, and they are essentially the leaders of the lizardmen. They're even greater magic users than the elves. The Slann were engineered to be able to wield magic even before magic had entered into the world, because as of yet, there was no real latent magic in this newly rebirthed planet. We're just about to get to that. You see, as the lizardmen enforced the Old Ones' will, the Old Ones came and went as they pleased, because when they arrived on the planet, they built two great warp gates at the polar regions of the world, gates that could transport the Old Ones to the other worlds they had colonized instantaneously. Literal teleportation. And for thousands of years, the Old Ones and the Lizardmen cultivated and shaped the world, and the elves and dwarfs were born during this time. It's difficult to say if the Old Ones made dwarfs, elves, and humans from native wildlife and bioengineered them, or if they were fully artificially created. But the elves were taken under the wing of the Slann in the early days, or at least some of them were, and the first dwarfs ever created were the ancestor gods, who in turn taught the other dwarfs their craft and way of life. Until one day, when an unspeakable tragedy occurred. The warp gates at the end of the world broke and collapsed. Remember, these were no ordinary gates, for they manipulated time, space, and even dimensions. And when they broke, they opened a rift from the realm of pure energy, also known as the realm of chaos. Suddenly, the world was forever changed as magic, which is essentially the stuff of chaos, flooded into the world from the warp gates, ravaging the landscape. With the essence of chaos came legions of demons and other monstrosities of the warp. Once this happened, the Old Ones disappeared. No one knows what happened to them. Some say they were destroyed when chaos seeped into the world and killed, and others say that they immediately fled the planet, leaving the lizardmen and their leaders, the Slann, to safeguard the world that they began. Thus began the first Great War of Chaos, and this is how you know Warhammer is badass. The first World War of the planet had dinosaurs fighting demons. Tell me that's not metal as fuck. The planet had been changed, and though the Sea of Magic had done its work, there was still enough that demons continued to pour forth from the broken warp gates. The lizardmen and the Slann battled the forces of chaos, being the greatest force and power in the old world and fighting against their masters, the Old Ones' greatest foe. But the warp gates continued to spill out monsters, demons, imps, and hell beings, and even the tireless lizardmen and the vastly powerful Slann were being overwhelmed, the Slann using their magics to safeguard their realms from the magic that had torn reality. The elves had used their magics as well to guard their realm as they also fought in the Great War, and the dwarfs fled underground and with their ancestor gods forged runic weaponry and stormed out of their mountain halls to fight the demons and beasts in the valleys. At this time, humans were still extremely primitive. and many of them only survived by living in caves. The humans that were actually caught out in the open, that didn't hide in the deep forests or the caves that could ravage the storm of chaos, became the beastmen, because the beasts of the forest and the men were fused together to create mockeries of both. It wasn't until the elves began the ritual which created the Great Vortex that things began to get better. The Great Vortex was essentially a drain, using waystones placed across the world that channels all of the latent magic that flows out of the shattered warp gates and redirects it to flow inwardly, finding a home in Ulthuan, which is the elven island nation, to in turn keep the elven nation from being swallowed by the sea and keeping the realm shielded magically. Of course, the vortex is not powerful enough to drain all of the magic from the world, but enough to keep the greatest demons and catastrophes of chaos from being wrought. For now. And so now, the chaos wastes in the far north and south poles are where chaos lingers at its strongest, for there lies the shattered warp gates where the realm of chaos constantly flows outward into our dimension. And there is still, of course, magic that floods the land, but it's very lightly coated now and used to be manipulated by mages and wizards. Now that we have spoken of the history of magic, let's talk about its categories. There's a few different types of magic in the Warhammer world. Magic, also known as the winds of magic or the Aether in the Elven tongue, is difficult to classify, as it's essentially chaos energy, or chaos given form. However, there have been 8 known winds of magic that have been discovered and categorized. Each wind is also known as a lore. I'll list them now. There's Haish, the White Wind, which is the lore of light, which is magic that's used to heal, protect, and banish darkness. Think of like priests or paladins. There's the Azir, or the Blue Wind, which is the lore of the heavens, which in its widest sense is called astrometeorological thaumaturgy, which is the magic of the stars, the upper atmosphere, and the weather. It's also used by seers and prophets. There's Chaman or Kaman, the Yellow Wind, which is the lore of metal, which is fairly self-explanatory. Imperial wizards of the Gold Order that use this are called alchemists. You shape metal, you gain power from it, various different things like that. There's Giran, the Green Wind, which is lore of life. This is natural magic, or magic that you might think a druid would use. In fact, Imperial wizards using this are sometimes called druids. There's Gur, the Brown Wind, the lore of beasts, and the spirits of the wild and such. There's Akshi, the Red Wind, the lore of fire, which is pyromancy. And there's Ulgu, the Grey Wind, the lore of shadow. This lore contains spells of darkness, invisibility, shadowy death, and panicked bewilderment. So essentially, shadows and the unknown. And then there is Shaish, the Purple Wind, which is the lore of death. And while necromancers do use this form of magic, you don't need to be a necromancer to use it. It's the magic that has to do with the mortality of life and the inevitability of mortal demise. So it's essentially the magic for lack of life or the ending of it. Now, the High Elves use what we call High Magic, which is a combination of all of these winds of magic put together, purified and formed into an effective and vastly powerful form of magic. Only the elves and the Slann mage priests can wield all 8 forms of magic, as they are in High Magic. However, during the last great chaos incursion over 2 centuries ago, the greatest elven archmage, known as Teclis, who fought alongside the dwarves and men, decided to teach men how to harness magic. For before them, the only men that knew magic were witches and hermits and apostates. But humans are not as advanced as the elves are when it comes to magic, and a human can only live long enough and contain enough power to master one form of magic. They might be able to use spells from different other types of magic, but they can only really get good with one of them. and with the help of Teclis, the Archmage, the 8 colleges of magic were born in the Empire. Each order connects to a certain wind of magic. There's the Light Order, which is the magic order dedicated to the lore of light. There's the Celestial Order, the magic order dedicated to the lore of the heavens. There's the Gold Order, which is the magic order dedicated to the lore of metal. There's the Jade Order, the magic order dedicated to the lore of life. The Amber Order, which is the order dedicated to the lore of beasts. The Bright Order, which is to the lore of fire. There's the Grey Order, which is the magical order dedicated to the lore of shadows. And the Amethyst Order, which is the magical order dedicated to the lore of death. Through these colleges, not only are men who wield magic made agents loyal to the state, but they are taught how to keep themselves from harming themselves and others, and they are able to learn how to control the energies of magic. Citizens of the Empire that are shown to have an aptitude are invited to the colleges of magic, but if they refuse, they are hunted down and silenced by the witch hunters. That may sound extreme, and it is extreme, but not only is a mage who isn't trained dangerous with their uncontrolled magics, but demons in the warp can see mages more clearly in the material plane than anyone else. Meaning that unless a mage learns how to guard against it, not only can they accidentally burn down their house and their neighbor's house, but they might also become possessed by a demon and used as a host. For a demon to be born outside of the Chaos Wastes, it's a scary thought. Now that we've covered the elves with their refined high magic, and the Empire, that is the more divided but still formidable colleges of magic, what about the dwarves? Well, the dwarves, like most dwarves in fiction, dislike magic, and they're also very resistant to its effects. A dwarf can survive in the Chaos Wastes unchanged far longer than a man or an elf, for instance. However, this also means they have trouble casting spells. The dwarfs don't care, that's how they like it. Normal magic is too unreliable to them and chaotic for them. Instead, they use what the ancestor gods taught them, which is the power of the runes, essentially a way to imbue an item with potent magic, with a vast alphabet of runes to give weapons, armor, and even household utensils different magical effects. They don't have nearly as many runic items or weaponry as they used to have, but it's still a big power that they wield. Probably the most powerful magical weapons the dwarves possess are the Anvils of Doom, which are a very powerful, ancient, and rare item jealously guarded by the dwarfs today. Only the greatest runesmiths can still wield them. Essentially, it's the only way that a dwarf can cast a varied amount of concentrated and powerful spells without having to continue to switch items. The Anvil of Doom and the runesmith is usually brought to a battle or summoned out of the hold to help guard the kingdom, and every runic hammer stroke on the anvil can open fissures in the ground or shoot lightning into enemy hordes or call down meteors to destroy their enemies. It's some scary shit. An honorable mention for the other human factions are for Bretonnia, Kislev, and Albion. Bretonnia, the Arthurian medieval kingdom to the south of the Empire, has even more powerful magic users than the Empire, but they are all female. They are the damsels of the lady that can master both the lore of beasts and the lore of life, whereas mastering 2 lores in the Empire, like I said earlier, is usually impossible for any human, really. And their semi-divine Fey Enchantress, who is also even more powerful than the damsels and essentially the leader of them. And they all get their magic from the Lady of the Lake, which is Bretonnia's ruling class's goddess. Kislev has its magisters as well, but there are not many. Mages are seen with distrust in the Empire, which is why they're quartered off to colleges, and Kislev is even more superstitious and worse to mages than the Empire is, where some witches and wizards are still burnt at the stake rather than used for the state, which is odd considering that their leader, the Tsarina of Kislev, is a very, very powerful ice sorceress who can call down blizzards and freeze rivers with a thought. Albion, which is the Warhammer equivalent of Celtic Britain, also has some impressive magic users. The Druids, who guard the Waystones, probably using the lore of the beasts, but it's hard to tell as they have hardly ever been studied by outsiders. The last bit of magic I'm going to talk about today is chaos magic, which is magic in its natural state, a force of pure energy that cannot be fathomed. It alters and shapes the very landscape, and it is apparently a random assortment of the 8 winds flung at the enemy. It's a very powerful form of magic, though, but it's also very volatile, as you might be able to tell. Only chaos sorcerers bother using it because they don't see the magics disfiguring them or their allies as curses, but usually as blessings. And if it does kill themselves or their allies, mostly their allies, they think it's just okay collateral damage. Alright, damn, that was longer than I thought. Sorry that took so long. I'll have another video on how magic works in the future, and that'll also connect to the 40k magic and the warp, but for now I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, please like and maybe subscribe if you care to, and comment below if you have anything to ask or say. Thanks.